Berthe was extremely happy with Eugene, or seems to have been, with her relationship, and she called him an honest and an excellent man who I believe sincerely loves me. Hi, this is Anita from 5 Minutes with Art from Anita Louise Art. Today we want to talk about what is kind of a little bit of a love triangle between Berthe Morisot and the Manet brothers, in particular, Edouard and Eugene. Many of you know Edouard Manet. He's quite a famous impressionist painter. But what you may not realize is that he actually painted Berthe Morisot, who's also another quite well-known impressionist painter, 12 times. He painted her more than any other person or subject that he painted, more than his wife Suzanne. Many of the paintings she sat for would have been considered very controversial for the day, so her reputation or standing would have been hurt. But it did not seem to bother her because she continued to still sit for him as one of his subject matters. But after Berthe married Edouard's brother Eugene, Edouard painted Berthe one last time. But in this painting, it's also noticeable that her wedding ring was extremely prominent. And it's kind of like her eyes had sort of lost that flirtiness and mystery that he had painted her in some of the previous paintings. Edouard Manet was also known to be kind of a bit of a woman's man. He was a bit of a rebel for the time. He was extremely gregarious. He was somebody who was known to have a lot of different affairs. It was rumored to have it. He really was kind of a bit of a questionable character during this time. So it's interesting to note that Berthe then married his brother, Eugene. And they didn't get married young. In fact, they were quite a bit older. When they got married, Eugene was 41 years old and Berthe was 33 years old. And this, for both of them, was their first marriage. So they would have been quite a bit older for their day. Probably she was considered a bit of an old maid. But yet she got married during this time. They would have one child, which her name was Julie. And Julie also became the subject of a lot of different paintings. But Berthe was adamant that the marriage would not change her art in any way. And from everything we read and everything we learn, we really discover that Eugene was extremely supportive of her in her painting. And that he, in fact, would go on trips with her. And he dabbled a little bit in art himself, but he really allowed her to be able to develop herself as an artist. She was very fortunate when she married Eugene because the marriage allowed her not to have to worry about money. So she could really just concentrate on her art and the developing of her art. And so by everything we read and everything we learn is that Eugene really supported her in her pursuit of art. That he was there with her the whole way and really believed in her. And we know that they traveled to many different places and he was always there with her. There's kind of this interesting sort of three-way relationship where Edouard was painting Berthe, and some of them were kind of a little bit, interesting paintings for the day where a lot of people assumed that maybe there was something going on between them. But then later she went and married the brother Eugene. And it's a love story between these artists, which is not very often told, but it's sort of an interesting love story. What we do learn is that Berthe was extremely happy with Eugene, or seems to have been, with her relationship. And she called him an honest and an excellent man who I believe sincerely loves me. And she said that she entered into a very positive life, and this was a really wonderful relationship for her. We know that when he died before her, she was extremely despondent. She was really upset about his death. We don't really know how she felt about Edouard, but we do know that Edouard at the time was married to Suzanne. And so any kind of marriage between her and Edouard would have been simply impossible because he was already married. This is one of these interesting stories that a lot of people may not know, that these three people were kind of intertwined in this long-lasting relationship. They all lived in France in the mid-1800s, and both Edouard Manet and Berthe Morisot are considered to be significant impressionist artists of the day, even though Berthe did not see so much success during her lifetime, but saw it later, and she's considered to be one of the most important women artists. The 5 Minutes with Art podcast is brought to you by AnitaLouiseArt.com. We'll put a link below to our blog and to our website in the description. Thank you so much for listening. We truly do appreciate your support, and we hope that you've enjoyed joining with us for 5 minutes a week to be able to learn some interesting facts and other things about art and the art world. Share this podcast with your friends and let them know about it. And we hope that you will also subscribe and become part of our community. Thank you again.